Welcome to Let's Talk. While Steve is enjoying sunshine in Asia, we are right now at the Parliament today to meet with Sir Iain Duncan Smith, former leader of the Conservative Party and one of the longest-serving MPs in the UK. Few British politicians have been as outspoken about China as he has. Let's see what he has to say today. Sir Iain, you have been in the Parliament for over 3 decades and you are known for a very strong stance on China, and you're even being sanctioned by Beijing. Why are you so concerned, and why are so many of other colleagues less so?
Well, I think there's been a problem that has clouded our sense of China for too long, which is essentially it grew out of the idea that somehow China was a cheaper and more efficient place to do business. We weren't alone in that. Most of Europe thought the same. And even the US got caught up in that. And so there was this kind of rush towards China without asking any of the questions about the nature of China's government, whether it can be conceived of as a viable partner for lots of reasons to do with things such as forced labor, etc., taking place. So they brushed all of that aside, and basically the free world has become completely dependent on China now for a whole range of things. If you then delve into further things like the politics of China, the abuses that take place, the failure to uphold World Trade Organization rules, you begin to see that governments have failed completely in the West to ask that big question, which is more than just the idea that you can make things more competitively. The question really is, how do you make those things, and is it fair and reasonable in the way that that is happening? And none of those questions were ever asked, I don't think.
With that backdrop, let us move quickly to the spy case that recently collapsed. 2 British men had been accused of spying for China, and the charges dropped suddenly. It seems that it has illustrated that Labour and also the previous Conservative government, they are just too unwilling to offend China. Is it the case?
I think it's partly that. It's also a bit of a mess that we got into because we had a National Security Act which dated right back to the beginnings of the First World War. And in that, the definitions of what constituted an enemy, because it had to be an enemy that you were giving secrets to, and it was inflexible. But having said that, the security services and the legal service both believed categorically that they had enough information to prosecute. They would not have prosecuted if they didn't think that there was a very strong probability of success at the end of it. And it boiled down to one particular problem. This is really where you deal with your question, which is, did the last government and did this government and previous governments too worried about upsetting China because of their obsession with getting more investment, inward investment and trade from China? There is some truth in that. The case isn't going to go through. There is no other way of mounting that case. So the government authorities have connived, in my view, at the ending of the spy case, and they have managed to succeed in doing that, which is damaging to our reputation. It has upset the Americans very strongly, and makes us look rather weak and pathetic in the face of what is essentially a growing threat from China.
But only in year 2023, your current party leader, Kemi Badenoch, who was then the business secretary, she said that we certainly should not be describing China as a foe. She said that as well.
She went on, if you read through the rest of that, to recognizing that there was a threat being posed by China. So, but I'm not excusing the previous government because they were under pressure constantly. The Treasury was obsessed with the idea of dealing with China. The Foreign Office, who I think sometimes are a very good opposite indicator. If the Foreign Office say we should do this, I will go in the opposite direction because I don't trust their judgment. But those two bodies alone, plus the government at the time, desperate for growth, same idea, were concerned about doing more business with China. Now, myself and others who have been arguing for some time, sometimes a little bit lonely, out on the edge, but saying to them, this is wrong, you will rue the day that you allow China to take over so much of our business, and that China themselves are ensuring that they will have the largest armies, navies and air forces in existence, and they pose a direct threat to Taiwan and others as well.
And now here comes the new China embassy, the super embassy or mega embassy in Eastern London. And you have once described it as the Project Kowtow. But the decision has been delayed and delayed again and again. Do you still think it will be approved?
Well, I have referred to our whole policy to China as Project Kowtow for some time, because it is literally that. We don't want to upset them, and they get their way. And this is what's creating a major problem for us, industrially, economically, and frankly, in defense terms. So the embassy is yet another highlight of the mistaken policy that the previous government and this government undertook. Will it go through? Well, it's been turned down by the local council twice now. It was then called in by the government. In fact, it was called in such a pathetic way that you could see back at Rio de Janeiro, I think the meeting of the G20 a year ago, when Starmer had his first international meeting or something. He holds a meeting with President Xi, and one of the things he starts talking about in a rather creepy sort of on bended knee kind of metaphorical way, saying, because obviously President Xi or his staff have said that they won't, if they don't get this embassy, then all ideas of trade arrangements are off. He opens up by saying, in response to you or something, he said, you will see that we have called in this planning committee. Why would a prime minister say that to a president? Planning issues are meant to be kept at the level of planning decision. They are not meant to be bandied around as giveaways for future policy. That's exactly what he meant. But I do think the government's intention right now is to grant it. And they had to postpone it during the spy trial because the public fury at the mess that they're in over that is terrible. And one thing I will say is the British public are way ahead of the government. They absolutely understand the threat that China poses and the problems with China.
You once accused Keir Starmer of kissing China's backside.
I think I said
on spy
President
case.
Xi's backside, actually. I thought I said President Xi's backside, I think. Well, it was a graphic concept, and I think it's true. It's metaphorical, of course. I'm sure it hasn't happened practically, but that is certainly where I think we are in terms of our policy towards China. And we have to change. And by the way, China itself has economic problems now as well. So this idea that we're going to desperately get some kind of huge trade uplift is just for the birds, really. The idea that somehow we can just get all this business flowing back and it'll be, two-way. It's not two-way. As I said earlier on, China's obsession in this is to dump their overproduced batteries, cars, and etc. Many of these bits and pieces, including solar arrays, are made using slave labor. We know that now categorically, particularly in Xinjiang, where the polysilicon is manufactured. We're able to demonstrate that this is used forced labor.
But in reality, is the government just simply too timid to say no to China?
My instinct with governments is they start with one idea and think that they can improve on what the other side has done, and then they get mugged by reality. And China is all about reality. No matter how much you think that you're going to be able to get growth from China, you won't. And the key thing is I've talked endlessly about totalitarian axis, a new axis of totalitarian states, which is North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran are the key proponents of it. But there are others as well involved in places like Myanmar. But the main bit is together they are working against the idea of the tenets of the free world. And they're winning at the moment. And that is our problem, trying to get the West to wake up to the fact that the things they hold most dear, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, the concept of the right to jury trials, habeas corpus, the rights of the individual, all these things upheld in law will go. And, we aren't awake yet to the threat properly. Public are, but the governments are not.
When Beijing sanctioned you, did anyone send you a congratulations card?
I think some did, but others, sent abusive cards, so a bit of both really, I suppose.
If Xi Jinping invited you to dinner, would you go?
Yeah, providing it's in the UK and not in his mega embassy, because we would have stopped it by then, but other than that, yeah.
And what would you ask him that would spoil his meal?
To embrace the concept of freedom and the rules of democracy and the rights of individuals, and to join the rest of us as a result in ensuring that people's lives are improved.
As a former soldier, what's one military habit you still can't shake off?
I sometimes practice drill, just walking around. When I'm thinking about a problem, I will sort of march up and down.
And do you polish your shoes to parade ground standard?
I have been known to, certainly. I don't spit and polish them, I have to tell you, like I would have done in the past, but certainly I was brought up to believe that a clean pair of shoes is the mark of a clear mind.
What's the first thing you notice when you meet young Hong Kongers in Britain?
Their enthusiasm and their real work ethic, which really makes me think that we once had the same work ethic, and we've kind of not seen it like that for a long, long time.
When Hong Kongers say add oil, what's the British equivalent?
I would think probably either one of two things, put some rocket boosters under it, or get your arse in gear. Sorry about that.
You have pressed repeatedly the government to do more for Jimmy Lai,
Yes.
a British citizen who is right now imprisoned in Hong Kong. Do you think the government has really done something about that?
Well, it's been a fight because it's been very difficult, and this was under the last government, of which I'm a conservative. It was a conservative government. So at first, the Chinese authorities denied any right to him. Then they fell back on dual nationality, which they don't recognize, which he's never been. But the British government kept talking about him as a dual national. And I literally one day exploded in the Westminster Hall. I actually shouted at the minister. I said, he is not a dual national. And you only say that because you know that that means China does not recognize dual nationals, so he has no rights. I went to see Lord Cameron when he became Foreign Secretary. And I said to him, all I want you to do is make this first step to say that he is a British citizen. That is the start, then, of everything else you can do. If you don't make that step, he is lost. And to be fair to David Cameron, he thought about it, and then he came out with a very strong statement. He said, Jimmy Lai is a British citizen. The whole of the Foreign Office had obviously told him, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But to be fair to him, he said, yes, we're going to say he is a British citizen because he is. So, all right, did the world change? No, but what it did mean is that we came into line, can you believe this, with other countries around the world. America had been calling him a British citizen for years. Even the European Union was calling him a British citizen. The only country that would not call him a British citizen was my country, whose citizenship he was a member of. And that was very important because now all of a sudden, all the other countries, because Britain has said it, are licensed to keep on saying he should have the consular rights that are his right, and as yet, of course, not granted.
But as you see, compared to the United States, compared to Donald Trump, what he has talked about Jimmy Lai in front of presidency. So do you think the British government has really have enough pressure to push for that?
No. The simple answer to that is no, they haven't. We've got them to this point where they've had to admit he's a British citizen, but they never tell you how they raised it. Well, there's a very interesting point. I refer back to the Rio de Janeiro meeting a year ago when I talked about the embassy comment. Just after that, he then raised the issue of Jimmy Lai. It's the first time I've seen a Prime Minister raise it, to be fair to Keir Starmer. He raised it, and at that moment, Xi just stopped the conversation and sent all the cameras out, gone. So they couldn't record it after that. And it was quite clear because he did not want to have any conversation about Jimmy Lai at all. And he didn't want the cameras to have him in any way humming and ahhing or saying something about Jimmy Lai. So what did Starmer do? And if I was Starmer, I'd have said, I'm afraid I'd quite like the cameras to be in here right now because I'm asking you a very simple question. Of course he didn't, and no doubt it was brushed under the carpet. I suspect conversations about Jimmy Lai are conducted by ministers as and when they ever say it, which is not all the time. Something along the lines of, I want to raise the issue of Jimmy Lai. It's none of your business. Right, moving on. That's how it works, I think. We raised the issue of Jimmy Lai. Really? How hard did you raise it? Not much.
And they talked about the China embassy in the same meeting.
Exactly that. And that was the whole point about the China embassy call-in. And so you can see the nature was to try and placate President Xi, who must laugh, if he does laugh at all. He must laugh to himself when he finishes those meetings.
And finally, Sir Iain, you have been sanctioned by China, by Beijing, and attacked by its media, and sometimes also ignored by your own side. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's worth it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, we just keep going. And I think I'm here for a purpose. It's very simple. I don't think this is a job or a career. I think this is a vocation. So we have to see it as an important thing for us to achieve the things we really care about or believe in. And the trouble is, in the period since the ending of the Cold War to now, we went through this ridiculous period of believing that that we had won in the sense that nobody would ever create such a nation again, that communism had failed, that authoritarianism had failed, and somehow everybody would join the free market and embrace democracy and freedom. Well, we've seen how wrong that forecast was. And we've seen the growth of totalitarianism around the world. There are now more totalitarian states in the world for the first time, I think, than there are democracies. And it's growing. So my point that I make is, unless we learn the real lessons and understand that these threats never go away and that you have to be vigilant because freedom at the end of the day is not free. It's the most expensive item you can ever think of because its cost comes in lives if you forget about it. And so we have to face up to that and not think that somehow it's the end of original history. It's not. History repeats itself if you're stupid enough not to read it.
Wow, thank you very much, Sir Iain Duncan Smith, to join us today. Thank you.